And that means we need to, head into this massive slate of 15 football games we're going to have covered.
Here we go.
On today's show, covering, by the way, every single fantasy relevant player out there. I do want to say, before we get going, that if you need extra help, a little bit of extra credit for your lineups, join us for Rotoworld Live every Sunday, noon Eastern on Twitch, on YouTube, on Periscope. Again, we're there for 45 minutes answering your start-sit questions, setting your optimal lineups, talking about matchups and plays and lines and all that kind of stuff. So again, join us at noon Eastern this Sunday. And as always, it is served by Applebee's. All right, let's kick this one off. The 4-8 Denver Broncos go to the Carolina Panthers, who are 3.5-point favorites at home, a total of 46.5. Pat, you get one of those every single show, and you already used it. Okay, Panthers are off a bye. Hopefully, Christian McCaffrey gets to play against his dad's old team. Does not seem likely after he missed practice on Thursday. And Daigle, that's not the end of it. I mean, the Panthers have had a number of COVID issues coming out of their bye. Sounds like DJ Moore has the coronavirus. A bunch of other names are close contacts, including Curtis Samuel. What's the outlook here for this Panthers offense? Is it one that we truly won't know until Sunday morning?
If Samuel was in fact a close contact and can turn around for this game, the good news is that he is still their wide receiver too. His types of targets he receives don't take away from Robbie Anderson, who would soak up all of this opportunity that DJ Moore likely leaves behind and testing positive. So I think Anderson's a terrific play here. I would like to get McCaffrey because remember last time they thrusted him right back in the lineup from injury against Kansas City. He handled 18 of 19 running back carries with 10 targets. But after a midweek downgrade after tweaking his calf in practice, it looks like we're going to be on hold. So if Mike Davis was dropped anywhere, you can run out and get him immediately because I'm still skeptical the Broncos can contend here.
I mean, Curtis Samuel is like the key here at this point because CMC trending the wrong direction. DJ Moore appears to be out. And as we know, when Christian McCaffrey hasn't played, I mean, Curtis Samuel gets goal line touches. And so it's like a very important situation for fantasy. It'll be a very important situation for the Panthers, who've been kind of throttling off Mike Davis. They're not going to have the luxury of doing it. He's still going to be in for at least 10 to 15 touches, but he's been kind of getting Giovanni Bernarded lately where he has just become so inefficient on both a per rush and a per catch basis that they've kind of had no choice but to dial off him a little bit. So if CMC's out and DJ Moore out, like Samuel, that would be like the one that kind of pushes this over the edge into like a really, really bad situation for the Panthers because of how versatile Curtis Samuel has been.
The Broncos are also missing Bryce Callahan, AJ Bouye, and another corner. So they're going to be using guys that have played like under 100 snaps at cornerback. So Robbie Anderson is somebody that I made my cover image for my preview column. I think he's an awesome spot. Curtis Samuel, like you said. And I do think with Mike Davis, I think the bye week probably helps him kind of like rebound after a couple of inefficient weeks. If Christian McCaffrey is out, you have to start. And the Panthers are projected for the 9th most points on the slate this week.
Yeah, speaking of the Panthers passing game, and I'm adding up everything you guys have talked about so far, I don't know if Teddy Bridgewater is the worst play at quarterback this week. I mean, the quarterback position, Pat, we talk about it in the rankings. It is not in a great spot heading into week 14. There's not a lot of home favorites with teams expected to score 24 points. And the Panthers are one of them. And I can add on to this. In 11 games this season, 8 wide receivers have finished with 80-plus receiving yards against the Denver Broncos. The Broncos have allowed 12 wide receiver touchdowns this season. And quarterback rushing, the Broncos defense have not been good this year. I mean, they allowed Sam Darnold to rush for 84 yards in a score. Obviously, Cam Newton, Taysom Hill, 2 touchdowns. Patrick Mahomes, 26 yards. We know that Teddy B has had a little dynamite in his feet this year in terms of picking up random yards here or there. Pat, it might happen for Teddy this week.
I'm kind of going the other direction. Teddy, was kind of hard capped. He had so few ceiling efforts. The Broncos defense has some vulnerabilities that you just laid out, but they're still kind of more of a bend but don't break defense. They're not going to break against Teddy Bridgewater, even on the road. And just, Teddy is someone when he's got his full supporting cast going, then you can kind of, he's like an easy guy to get in like streamer rhythm with. But he's been banged up a lot in the second half of the season, a lot of like minor injuries. And Teddy was actually someone that I was kind of, the other upside bets are like risky bets I would take. I would rather play Jalen Hurts. I'd rather play Cam Newton and Jared Goff in their bad matchups. I'd rather play Mitch, which, just cancel me for saying
Wait. You'd rather play Jalen Hurts, who we'll get to in a moment, over Teddy Bridgewater?
Easily. I mean, Jalen Hurts is a real deal dual
Easily.
threat. It's a horrible matchup, but he's a real deal dual threat.
Okay.
So yeah, absolutely.
That's one to monitor as we move forward. Dago, anything to say about the Broncos offense? I mean, Drew Lock has looked absolutely horrific. I was looking at his passing chart, and according to Next Gen Stats, there are only 2 zones of 12 that are above league average, and about 8 that are below league average. I mean, he's awful. He's a bottom 3 quarterback in the NFL right now.
Jerry Jeudy, the leader in my Prairie Yards model, because he's getting heaved balls that don't matter whatsoever, completely inaccurate. Whereas it's hard, it's admittedly impossible to sift through Tim Patrick's box score because he has been ejected, injured, and played a full game with Kendall Hinton the past 6 games. But when healthy since week 6, he has been their number one wide receiver. This past week, of course, 2 touchdowns, didn't get 6 targets like he had in his ongoing streak previously in full games, but still 2 touchdowns. Drew Lock is at least delivering to him. So really, that's all I'm on. You would think it's a good matchup for their running backs, but as long as Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay are both available, which looks like what they're trending towards here, it just eats away at one another, and you have to hope they explode, even though Lindsay continues looking like the better player weekly.
Hey, and I thought we were really close to getting like that Noah Fant breakout game that you keep talking about last week because he looked good in that first quarter. But then, Drew Lock continues to do Drew Lock things. And that's that for 2020 for the Broncos. All right. Shall we move on? Let's move on. Houston Texans, Chicago Bears, total of 45. Texans on the road are 1-point favorites. Neither team has a winning record. But because the Bears are so bad, Pat, the awful victory that they gave to the Lions last week has just been slid under the rug a little bit, and no one is talking about how disgusting it was to watch that Bears team operate last week. But, Pat, we do have a glimmer of hope. And who would have thought that in week 14, the glimmer of hope on the Chicago Bears would be David Montgomery against possibly his best matchup of the season of this Houston Texans defense?
Yeah, you've got the, little, not something you would ever draw up, is the David Montgomery triple down. We are tripling down on David Montgomery for the first round of the fantasy playoffs, and he's been living off good matchups. But so it's the Texans this week. It's been the Packers and the Lions. He's the 3 defenses allowing the most fantasy running back points are the Texans, Packers, and Lions. So. David Montgomery, we didn't even know if he was the kind of guy who could take advantage of these good matchups, but he's looked refreshed the past few weeks. He has coming out looking like a little more springier, a little livelier, and he's at least cashed in back-to-back amazing matchups. This is arguably the most amazing of the 3 matchups. And I thought David Montgomery, as the season progressed and bye weeks ended and all 32 teams were playing, would be someone I got to phase out of the RB2 rankings. Whereas instead, he's ascended, and now he's a low-end RB1. And what was he the RB1 or 2 overall last week?
Number 1 last week.
He was number 1 overall last week, yeah.
Yeah, so strange times, 2020.
That someone in social media or around the industry is probably going to cite some meaningless stats explaining why he was better in this stretch. We can shush them then because, again, the matchup is just as good as the past 2 weeks. I don't think anything's changed in his overall performance, but when he's continuing to get touches and you're playing soft matchups, why the hell not in 2020? So no argue for me anymore as a top 6, top 5 guy.
You know what? I'm going to stand up for David Montgomery here, Hayden.
I
actually think he has improved a little bit as a player. This is the peak form we've seen from David Montgomery as a professional. He is, making one move, making the first person miss, and then making the second person miss. And a lot of those carries inside the 10 and 20-yard line are some of his best carries right now. And other backs, yes, I'm going to say this, other backs in the league wouldn't have been able to score some of the touchdowns that he has over the last few weeks. He is making yards on his own, and that is the definition of a great back versus a good back. I'm not saying that he can do that for the rest of his career, but in this string of games, it's absolutely working out.
I would agree that he's looked better the last couple of weeks, but I don't want to overrate a 2-game sample when we've had 20 games previously when we thought he wasn't very good. So I'm with you. The usage is awesome. The matchup is awesome. So I have David Montgomery as an RB1 as well. I think the Texans team is the more interesting team to break down here just because we have some answers at what they're going to do at receiver and at tight end. So last week, Chad Hanson basically took over the Will Fuller role. He was the downfield threat. Brandon Cooks kind of stayed in his own lane. And then Kiki Kuti was the underneath slot guy. And all 3 of these guys basically ran all the routes. There wasn't really a big change in tight end usage or running back usage, we just kind of have answers. It's going to be Chad Hanson downfield, Brandon Cooks as the target leader, and then Kiki Kuti kind of depending on matchup, how he's going to fare out of the slot.
All they did was plop Hanson on the boundary for Will Fuller. Like, they just treated Hanson as Will Fuller, oddly enough. QT still impressively led in air yards, which I did not expect among that group, and the target share. But I don't think we should be as afraid of the Bears as we were at the beginning of this year. 41 and 34 points allowed because they're banged up in their front seven. And if they're not getting a pass rush, then, of course, they can't sustain performances like they did previously. And now they get Deshaun Watson, who's still playing well without Will Fuller. So, yeah, I like the over a lot in this game, honestly. And then I think the Texans deliver on offense, which also helps out this new fantastic running ability of David Montgomery.
Yeah, John, you made a great point about the Bears defense. Like, it kind of looked like their soul left their body in week 12 against the Packers. Like, they kind of, it's, this is always projection from people watching at home on the couch, but it kind of looked like they gave up. Like, that's, too strong. Clearly they're professionals. They're not giving up, but they look just worn down from a horrible season in week 12. And then they let Matthew Stafford throw for 400 yards on them last week, without Kenny Galladay, without DeAndre Swift. And I mean, Deshaun Watson, who I thought had been underrated all season, and come out in a really tough matchup last week and still having one of his best starts. And yeah, Chad Hanson, I was hoping to be Isaiah Coulter, but it was Chad Hanson, and he can also play inside. He wasn't doing that like John, but he can be like a versatile Chris Hogan type. He can be inside, outside. But I would be Texans are a team I'm very excited to see this week if they can carry it over their post Will Fuller play in another on paper tough-ish matchup.
Yeah, just one final note on that Bears defense. Aaron Rodgers and Matthew Stafford combined for 7 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. And Deshaun Watson is every bit of the player that Matthew Stafford is, and very, very close, I would say, to Aaron Rodgers this season, even if people, are putting Mahomes and Rodgers up there as the top 2 quarterbacks in the NFL this year. You would not get an argument from me if Deshaun Watson is third on that list. All right, moving on. Dallas Cowboys, Cincinnati Bengals. Dallas 3-9, 3.5-point favorites at home. Just a teeny tiny total of 42.5 in this game. Hayden, because the Bengals defense, at times they might be over their skis in terms of performance versus talent. This Cowboys offense should be one that we are aggressive in starting. So how many pieces of that Cowboys offense are you trusting here? 4?
Well, I think Andy Dalton's kind of rescued the floor of the team. They're much better than they were under DiNucci and Gary Gilbert, but only 2 of these receivers / Dalton Schultz are probably going to have good days, and the other 2 are probably going to have forgettable days. I think that CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup are more like wide receiver 4s than they were in previous weeks when they were like more or less off the radar. And I think Amari Cooper is still the lead guy as like a wide receiver 2 or 3. I think that there's a reasonable chance that 2 of these guys have really solid games. Two guys have okay games, and it's pretty hard to predict. We've seen Michael Gallup, his role kind of increase, but we're dealing with small samples here. We know that all 3 of these guys are good if they get the targets. We are still kind of learning who's going to get those targets.
Yeah, there's a lot of empty calorie targets to go around in this offense right now because the running game has been kind of struggling too. So I think that the volume will stay maybe kind of surprisingly high. And I view Amari Cooper as like a safe wide receiver 2. I still view CeeDee Lamb as kind of in the wide receiver 3 conversation, like low end, I guess. Michael Gallup, we thought was totally out. Maybe now he can enter like Denzel Mims, Brashad Perriman, big play, wide receiver 4, like dart throw territory. And Dalton Schultz has been kind of shockingly consistent volume. Even he's kind of like in the top 14 or 15 at tight end. I mean, talk about like empty calories, but he will get the job done at PPR and half PPR. I'm just reiterating everything Hayden said because
basically, I was going to wait for you to make that comment, but yes, you basically are. Daigle, anything on the Bengals side, because it's Brandon Allen, and we know he got a fluke touchdown, 77 yards to Tyler Boyd last week. T. Higgins has missed some practice time after leaving in the final series of last week's game. It's the first round of the fantasy playoffs. I'm not sure how many people got there with these Bengals on your roster, but confidence level in them.
I'd be listening if someone wanted to tout Bernard as a fringe RB1 this week in a matchup. This Cowboys linebacking core, maybe we can blame Mike Nolan the scheme, but Jalen Smith and LVE are out there. We saw it against Lamar Jackson, rattles off a 37-yard touchdown run, I believe, completely untouched up the middle. They just look absolutely lost right now. Talk about players not giving up. Maybe that core has given up. But it's a good matchup, though, on the ground, honestly. And for the same way, we didn't talk about Zeke, and I'm the one who yells about him every single week. But again, it also is a terrific matchup. No matter how much I wanted to push him down in the rankings, finalizing before this show, even with all buys out of the week, there's not really many other confident options. Like, you reach Ronald Jones when you get to RB12 overall, and you're like, well, I have to start Zeke over here, my guess. So I think Zeke is a terrific matchup-based play. If there's another game the Cowboys can win this year, it's this one. I mean, I have my doubts they can, but it's this one.
Now let's go to the Tennessee Titans, Jacksonville Jaguars. Total of 53 in this game. The 8-4 Titans are 7.5-point favorites here on the road. Last time Ryan Tannehill, Hayden, faced this Jaguars defense, he was 18 of 24 for an incredibly efficient 239 yards and 4 touchdowns. Meanwhile, in history tells us that Derrick Henry has monster games against the Jaguars. He did not in that week 2 performance. 25 carries, 84 yards. Anything going to change in this performance?
Well, the Jaguars are still missing their 3 top corners, and they play a lot of cover 1-man defense, and they don't have the corners to stop A.J. Brown and Corey Davis this week. So I'm willing to run it back with Ryan Tannehill as a quarterback 1. You have to start Corey Davis if you have him. You're obviously starting A.J. Brown. And like you said, Derrick Henry's in an absolute smash spot once again here. I mean, they're 7.5-point favorites. His usage was dialed back last week, but he's trying to win a rushing title here. So if you have any Titans in your lineup, you're obviously starting them against the Jaguars. The Titans are projected for the 3rd most points on the week.
That would be back-to-back years, right, of the rushing title?
I believe so.
And people are really smashing the Ryan Tannehill streaming option, even though he's not necessarily a streamer. He's kind of, every week QB1. And like a motif that can be overrated that I bring up all the time is like, so the Titans are huge favorites against a terrible team. Will they pass enough to get Ryan Tannehill, like his high-end QB1 numbers? And a lot of times that fear doesn't really come to pass, but I do think this week it is a genuine fear where the Titans the Jaguars are so decimated at every level of the defense. They're a top 5 defense in terms of running back fantasy points allowed. The big dog is hungry after last week's disappointing showing, and I do fear for Ryan Tannehill that it could just be Derrick Henry going completely bonkers. But as I said, that does not come to pass a lot of times. Like, Patrick Mahomes has proven that over and over again this season. But I think it's a more real threat in this game than some of those other games we've talked about.
Well, real quick, I do think the one pushback in these scenarios, and when you're looking at the point spreads, is their implied team total. And when the Titans are implied to score 30 points, even if Derrick Henry has 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, like the other points are coming from Ryan Tannehill. So I do look at point spreads, but I'm more looking at the team totals first rather than the point spreads in most.
And last week, of course, was the first time all year that Derrick Henry got game scripted out of the game altogether. And it's not going to be every week where Baker throws 304 TDs on you in the first half. So I think just more of a fluke showing. Remember, he averaged 29 touches in the 2 games prior, whereas he only had 16 in this last one. So while I actually I think it's more advantageous spot for Tannehill to just blow up here with Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. Of course, I think Derrick Henry's in an amazing spot as well, especially if the Jaguars respond against this Titans defense that just has no pass rush. Everyone's banged up that can reach the quarterback. And for all of Glennon's falls, and there are a lot of them, he's at least thrown a league-high 16 attempts, 20-plus yards downfield the past 2 weeks. I think he's going to get DJ Shark going in a tremendous spot. I think we may see Colin Johnson pop up here a little bit as well. So I like the total. I like the game environment for everyone here, honestly.
Hasn't Colin Johnson emerged as Mike Glennon's #1 target? I mean, it's his favorite target right now. In his last 2 starts, 4 catches, 96 yards in a score, 4 catches, 66 yards. I mean, I know DJ Chark missed one of those contests, but if you're looking in the 2 smallest sample size games that we can possibly look at, Johnson is the one who's emerging. We talk about all these other random names who have emerged in recent weeks, Chad Hanson, Kiki Cutie, so on and so forth. I haven't seen Colin Johnson get any love. And meanwhile, as you alluded to, Daigle, the Titans are facing more pass attempts per game only behind the Seattle Seahawks. That's it. Number 2 in the NFL this season. And earlier this season, Pat, in that week 2 performance, Gardner Minshew threw 3 freaking touchdowns against them. And Mike Glennon this year is playing just as well, if not, I think, a touch better than Gardner Minshew was earlier this season.
Hasn't Colin Johnson emerged as Mike Glennon's number 1 receiver? Is maybe the darkest sentence I've heard on this podcast. Mike Glennon has been frisky over the past 2 weeks. And yeah, the Titans defense looked like it might as well have not been on the field last week. It's a very difficult time still envisioning a player as bad as Mike Glennon finishing as like a top 16 or top 18 fantasy quarterback. But I think kind of what we're all alluding to, that he could play well enough to get everyone on to keep the game close enough for everyone in Tennessee to get their numbers. That might be Mike Glennon's biggest fantasy impact this week.
I agree.
It's James Robinson, DJ Chark. That's it. The Colin Johnsons don't mess with that during the playoffs. I mean, I think the reason why Colin Johnson played last week, Laviska Shenault left early, and the previous weeks DJ Chark was out. So I think that's why he's on the outside, because the outside receivers were injured.
I'm just disappointed, Pat. It took you until week 14 to use the phrase motif. I mean, that needs to be unleashed every single week, I believe. All right.
I'm a big fan of the word. I'm shocked I hadn't used it yet, but I promise to use it every week going forward.
Let's go to one of the best games of the weekend. That's the 11-1 Kansas City Chiefs facing off against the Miami Dolphins, who, as everyone knows, are 8-4. A total of 49.5 for the Chiefs as 7-point favorites. Daigle, there's no way that the Dolphins can put up enough points on the board here to keep up with Kansas City, right? And while the Dolphins have confused a number of quarterbacks this season, and Justin Herbert and Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes is clearly on another tier.
And his efficiency, both against man coverage, which the Dolphins will likely run, or if they choose to blitz him, has been terrific. It's Patrick Mahomes, obviously. What's interesting for the Chiefs' offense in this spot, though, is that we look at Miami's secondary and think, okay, there's a group of corners that can handle him. It would be them. But Brian Flores ran a season-high rate of no huddle last week, which afforded to a season-high 39 pass attempts. And he was actually extremely efficient from no huddle, leading Flores to say that they're going to do that more this week. And if that is the case, then we will see more volume for this Chiefs passing attack. As we mentioned every week, that has had the highest pass rate, both the neutral game script and a lead the past 5 games now, as they continue just leaning on Patrick Mahomes to build the score and then to pad the score. So the game environment here also is a tremendous one that makes Tua a viable 2-quarterback superflex streamer if you're in a pinch.
Yeah. If you read like the tweets, or God forbid you read the Rotoworld Slacks, you would think that Tua Tagovailoa has been like the worst
player ever.
Well, Pat, there is one person who is extremely guilty of that, and we will not name names because he is not representing himself here. But I think everyone, and I think you're getting to this, Pat, everyone who watched the contest last week in the Cincinnati Bengals could see that, yes, in the first half, it was dull, it was boring, it was not good, it was lethargic. But in the second half, Tua was crisp, he was decisive, and at times that offense was explosive. And I think you can latch onto that and move forward with it.
Yeah, he's just playing like a conservative rookie quarterback in an offense that's low on weapons, and he's trying not to make mistakes, and he's not making mistakes. So sometimes that has led to a lack of big plays. But yeah, it was kind of like a switch flipped at halftime last week. And, the Cardinals game happened. That existed, where he played extremely well. He lost Preston Williams that game, which seemed to have a huge impact on the Dolphins offense. But yeah, Tua could be a guy who could he could flip matchups this week as like a super flex or a second QB, because there is just a lot of upside. And because with John said going faster pace too, there's going to be a lot of upside just in the pure volume. The Dolphins are going to have to get out of their passing game this week.
To your point, Pat, he's playing like a quarterback that was injured and didn't have a training camp or preseason.
And by the way, it's more than one Rotoworld person. It's another Rotoworld legend. Anthony Costa is also not.
Well, you're supposed to name names, Pat.
I love that Pat just named the name of of one and not the other. So I will let you all read into that.
I can put 2 and 2 together. His name is Mick Ninzio.
Yeah. Hayden, I mean, both of these backfields are one of fantasy relevancy, right? Myles Gaskin has taken a hold of the Dolphins one. I would say that he could get scripted out of this situation, which could be frustrating. But on the Chiefs end, and I've talked about this in every single show this week, so why not make it 4 for 4? That I drafted Miles Sanders and Clyde Edwards-Helaire in one of my most important leagues. And now CEH is completely unplayable now. And I would even say that Le'Veon Bell is probably completely unplayable as well.
Le'Veon Bell's always been unplayable. He looks bad out there. And I think I kind of was drawing the comparison to like LaShawn McCoy last year, where the Chiefs gave it a try with the veteran, kind of helped out maybe an inexperienced player. And I think that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is probably going to jump back into the starting mix, assuming he gets into full practice on Friday. I think that I'm not sure if he's a top 24 running back, but he has way higher ceiling than all the other running backs that you'd rank around him. They're just not using him very much right now because, like Daigle said, their neutral pass rate is way high up. Myles Gaskin, though, he's a rock solid RB2 right now. He's getting all the volume. He's getting RB1 volume, and he gets enough catches to kind of mix in. He gets all the goal line work. And I just think, quite frankly, he's like clearly the best running back they have. That's not really saying a lot. But I think that Myles Gaskin is a pretty sturdy RB2, even in potential negative game script.
Gaskin has that Nick Chubb thing too, where he's actually just a bad runner inside the 5-yard line, despite being efficient all across the rest of the field. But Savon Ahmed, DNP on Wednesday and Thursday, looking like he's not going to be involved. And we saw last week Gaskin in his first game from injured reserve, 7 snaps, 87% of the team's running back carries, 23 touches overall. So full go ahead.
Closing thought on CEH. The Miami Dolphins defense has allowed the highest success rate to running backs through the air this season. So wouldn't shock me at all. Hopefully. I mean, this is a glimmer of hope that CEH gets it done through the air. We've seen him do that in the past, Pat, and maybe it happens this week. And that's how he gets back to relevancy.
Yeah, and it's bad matchups in theory for the Chiefs wide receivers, so it would make a lot of sense. The CEH, the problem is he's just underperformed in every kind of matchup. Good matchups, bad matchups, good pass defenses, bad. So we would like to see it, especially coming off his viral illness. But I agree, there are glimmers of hope this week.
6-6 Arizona Cardinals are 1.5-point favorites against the New York Giants. I mean, it's like turning to America's team, the New York Giants. They're 5-7 on the year, a total of 45 in this game. Pat, I'll go back to you for this one. I mean, the Cardinals, again, are 1.5-point favorites. Is it recency bias to question if that is fair after what the Giants have done in recent weeks, the positivity that they've instilled in everyone out there? Meanwhile, the Cardinals are basically lost 5 in a row if they didn't convert that Hail Murray into the end zone against the Bills.
Yeah, I've honestly found this to be the strangest line of the week. It's been kind of yo-yoing. It appears it's back to 2.5 points right now for the Cardinals as road favorites. And talk about two units just going in different directions. The Cardinals offense since Kyler Murray's shoulder injury and the Giants defense over the past few weeks. You just shut down the Seattle Seahawks. And just one of the saddest thing I think I've seen all week is the next gen stats of Deandre Hopkins' route trees the past few weeks. And the Cardinals just kind of seem like an offense like lacking for answers right now. It's like without Kyler Murray until he can reprove his health and like really reestablish that rushing threat. It's hard to have faith in the Cardinals, especially on the road. And maybe if Colt McCoy was making another start, that's not happening. Daniel Jones, I don't know, maybe that's actually good for the Cardinals. Who knows? Maybe Daniel Jones has turned it over 19 times. But I found it to be a curious line. And yeah, I mean, the Cardinals, they're to the point with me where like I need to see it to believe it again, to believe Kyler's health, to believe, they're going to be a dangerous fantasy offense because it has not been easy on the eyes the past 3 weeks.
DeAndre Hopkins, of course, fewer than 60 yards in 3 consecutive games now in 4 of his last 5. I haven't lost faith in Kingsbury as a play caller, but it's going to magic he used last year in the second half of the season to change this thing entirely. Hopkins route tree, like Pat mentioned, of course, like that since the air raid just calls for receivers to go to their spots quickly on the field. But as we know, outside of Hopkins, like you have Isabella, who's not getting it done in 2 starts for Fitzgerald. You have Fitzgerald at his age, and then nowhere else to turn to. So they don't have a choice. Like they have to start moving Hopkins around this formation.
Yeah, I'm going to hop in here and pull my best John Daigle and ask Cliff Kingsbury, what you think you're doing here, pal? Because, look, if the only excuse you have out there is Kyler Murray has to run or can't run because the defense is forcing him to hand the football off, then your offense disappears after that. And so far, that's exactly what it's done. You're getting paid to manufacture yards, points, production from an offense that has one of the great young quarterbacks in the league, one of the top 3 wide receivers in the league, a running game that has talent that you're devoting money to, and you can't do it. And I think part of that, and Hayden, you can back me up here probably, is that he is trying to use his same concepts that sometimes work and sometimes do not. And I would namely point to like these wide receiver screens. We know how much Kyler threw them last year. They're dropping in that rate this year. But if you look on the Cardinals roster, they don't have a player who's explosive to win on those screens. They don't have like a Deebo Samuel or a Julio Jones or any of that type. Like, you're throwing these to DeAndre Hopkins, not a yards after catch player. You're throwing them to Larry Fitzgerald, Christian Kirk, Andy Isabella. Maybe they need to do more to the latter two.
Izzy, man.
Yeah, and then in my opinion, DeAndre Hopkins against James Bradbury is a very fair matchup because these are the type of wide receivers that James Bradbury does best against. Those at the catch point, ballerina types that can go up and get those circus grabs. I'm really leaning towards the Giants here.
The Cardinals aren't throwing the ball over the middle, which is, I don't want to say it's a Kyler height thing, but it's not a Kyler height thing right now. And they're not using any crosses or anything. Like you said, it's a very repetitive offense. Christian Kirk runs clear out routes. Andy Isabella and Larry Fitzgerald are doing basically nothing over the middle. And then DeAndre Hopkins is like solely on the outside. And I don't know if this is an injury thing, but the Cardinals ran a season low 27% neutral pass rate last week as well. So I want to believe in this, but there are some issues right now. And like Josh said, I think that it's these schemes that were kind of working in college and the NFL, it's not totally working out right now. Last week, I saw a lot of like 2 deep zone defense from the Rams, but the safeties were like 10 yards off the line of scrimmage, like not like 15, 20 yards off the line of scrimmage like usual, way down in the box because they're not throwing anything downfield. So they have some issues I'm not sure they're going to figure out immediately. I do think that the way that the Giants defense kind of lays out, that they allow some underneath production, and that's kind of where the Cardinals passing offense can get going a little bit. But I'm thinking that we've seen the top for Kyler Murray this year, but I also think like last week was probably the bottom. I think he's probably going to even out as like a mid-range quarterback one.
And to be fair, I believe him. I don't think it's a shoulder issue at all. Like, he even told media, "What do you want me to do? If I pull the ball out and run, I'm going to run directly into the defense. I have to keep handing it off." And so I think that's the case, and that's what we're seeing now with 15 total carries and 3 consecutive games.
And it's been the beneficiary for Kenyan Drake. Yes, that's the name I was thinking of. Because
the guy, the superstar.
I got it. Because he's been fantastic inside the 20, inside the 10-yard line because of volume. I mean, he is seeing so many more opportunities in those areas in comparison to all of his peers. And it's because now we saw earlier in the year, Kyler one-on-one, you cannot tackle him in that area of the field. And now defenses are forcing him to hand the football off. And despite Kenyan Drake not being good this season, he is good for us because of those opportunities. By the way, before we go, Pat, you and Daigle certainly lost that Wayne Gallman bet last week.
What was it again?
It was 145.
I mean, come on.
The yardage total he needed to get to. And they got to 135.
He got to a career high 135.
Because the average points were 14 and a half, and they got 13 and a half. Sorry, guys. I mean,
5-point bonus for 100.
Your jobs
Give
next
it to
time.
me.
Be better at your jobs. Anything we need to say about this Giants offense? I mean, all we've talked about is Arizona offense versus Giants defense, and there's a whole nother side of the ball to this equation.
Darius Slayton, guys. Daniel Jones coming back. John, what's Daniel Jones coming back mean? Lay it on us.
I was hoping you had an answer. Remember, Sterling Shepard's target share in the 4 games with Daniel Jones before he got injured was exceeded 24%. He was the number 1 receiver. So a higher floor if Daniel under center. Much like last week, though, if Daniel Jones is out and it's Colt McCoy, the receivers lose their value. It is good, though, to see them literally just try to pelt Evan Ingram all over the field now. Even if they're inefficient targets, they actually are integrating him as their featured player. So he now stands the top 6 tight end, fortunately, after we were worried about his inaccurate targets because they came far and few between through the first 8 games of the year.
All right. Let's now go to the Minnesota Vikings and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucks at home, 6.5-point favorites, a total of 51.5. And as you know, the Bucks are 7-5. And somehow the Minnesota Vikings at 6-6 are still in this playoff race. Hayden, is Tampa Bay still a defense we should fear for fantasy purposes? I mean, Derek Carr, Daniel Jones, Drew Brees, Teddy Bridgewater, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes have combined to throw 16 touchdowns versus 6 interceptions versus Tampa Bay in recent weeks. Is this top unit that we thought earlier in the year slipping a little bit. And we surely know that at times Kirk Cousins has channeled his inner Jameis Winston, throwing the football to Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson down the field.
The Bucs are allowing the highest neutral pass rate on defense in the NFL. And I think part of the reason is, one, they're good up front. Even without Vita Vea, they're still a pretty good unit stopping the run. And two, they blitz a lot, which is forcing these teams to get the ball out quick to their playmakers. And I think that the Bucs are a decent defense overall, but they're super aggressive and they're very vulnerable to big plays. And Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen are the big play threat. So I don't think that I'm going to be downgrading Justin Jefferson or Adam Thielen at all in this matchup. Even though I do think the Bucs defense overall is still a pretty good defense, they're just very risky. And when you're taking on that much risk, these offenses are passing the ball more because of that. And I think that opens up some big plays.
I would like to see Carlton Davis singled up many times on Justin Jefferson this weekend. That would be very fun after one of the worst single coverage performances in recent memory from Carlton Davis against Tyreek Hill. I still feel really bad about that one 2 weeks after the fact. And I mean, it's interesting. You talk about the Bucs being a gambling defense. I mean, Kirk Cousins would be a quarterback, I would like to send free blitzers at, or like try to jump routes on. He will accommodate you. But yeah, this is like the season for both these teams. And like the Bucs coming off bye, the Bucs got a lot of questions though. They're coming off the latest bye like in human history. And Mike Evans is suddenly questionable. He missed practice Thursday with a hamstring issue. Chris Godwin, I guess, isn't questionable. He missed practice time with this finger injury, but it's just because they were getting the pins out. But I mean, if Mike Evans can't go, I mean, the Bucs, they cannot get any target certainty whatsoever on offense. And that would be just another late season like wrench being thrown in the system there if Mike Evans cannot go. And an amazing matchup. And the Vikings, and if he does not play, I really, really wonder how this Bucs offense, which has just frankly been off the rails most of the past month, and that would be an enormous loss for Tom Brady.
The good news for Cousins is that not only has he been outstanding, 8.6 yards per attempt since week 6, forwarded volume, 45 and 43 pass attempts the past 2 games. As you mentioned, Josh, like this Bucs secondary has basically become a pass funnel. But I think we can see the volume again because we know what the Vikings will try to do. They're going to try to run Dalvin Cook up the middle, start the game, and I don't think it's going to go well. 3 yards per carry allowed to opposing running backs, and a league low in yards permitted on the ground by over 150 to opposing running backs as well by that Bucs front 7. So if we do get Cousins going through the air, that would instill the fireworks because we also know the Bucs want to throw against a Vikings defense that just doesn't have answers. Eric Kendricks DNP throughout the week, and he's the one player, as I did, I usually rewatch the games on Monday as I'm doing Excel things. What's up, ladies? And I just kept hearing Eric Kendricks' name in the corner. Like, what is he? Every time I look up, he's trying to make a play, and he's out now. Yannick Ngakoue still leads the team in sacks. He was traded in week 6. They have nothing to offer. So I think it's a great game for Brown.
I saw it mentioned on Twitter this week, though, that like they are improving despite all the deficiencies. Like Mike Zimmer, from a coaching standpoint, is improving, but I don't know how. I don't know how they are. And Eric Kendricks, and we've seen Ronald Jones explode at points this year. And as long as this team isn't working from behind and is forced to use, in their terms, forced to use Leonard Fournette in the passing game, I think Ronald Jones could potentially have a top 15 week.
So Ronald Jones is frustrating because he had the team's only first half touchdown, 37-yard reception, and then got 1 target the rest of the game. In the third quarter, he ran for a 34-yard run and didn't get a touch the rest of the game. And then Bruce Arians comes out the next day and says, oh, Ronald Jones needs to have 20 touches. There's only one person in charge of that, and it's the one man saying Ronald Jones needs 20 touches. So like we mentioned earlier, sifting through rankings, I did have him as the RB12 or 13 on the week, but do I fully trust that? No, because I know a wrench can be thrown into this at any moment.
Yeah.
Rojo, the past 3 weeks, 1 week was a lot of yards and a lot of touches. 1 week was not so many yards and not so many touches. And 1 week where he had like a decent amount of yards on a decent amount of touches. And the usage is just all over the map. The thing that during that 3-game time span, we just basically got 3 straight lulls from Leonard Fournette. Like he's not playing well. He's playing terribly. I mean, Rojo's making mistakes, but I agree with John. I don't understand why this is so complicated for Bruce Arians and the Bucs. I mean, maybe it's Tom Brady just going rogue and not liking the occasional mistake Ronald Jones makes. But I too have Ronald Jones ranked like a top 15 or 16 back. You have to do it. There's so much uncertainty at running back. He's one of the only guys providing any kind of ceiling days whatsoever. And my one part, the only thing I can think of with the Vikings defense, Josh, is just that Mike Zimmer is an amazing game planner and he's duct tape and gluing this thing together. But yeah, Rojo, top 15, top 16.
Let's now go to the late games on Sunday. The 8-4 Indianapolis Colts go on the road to the Las Vegas Raiders. Total of 51.5. Hey, two teams with winning records. That can be difficult to come by on this slate. The Colts on the road are 3-point favorites. Look, Hayden, Jonathan Taylor, T.Y. Hilton, after frustrating start to the season, strong close to these seasons. However, I believe the Colts are down 2 left tackles. That can be important when Phillip Rivers, who has had to deal with those types of injuries throughout his entire career to his offensive line, but as we know now, he's nearing, I would say, age 59. So that might be more of an issue if, big if, the Raiders had a pass rush.
I was just going to say, the Raiders are 29th in adjusted sack rate. They don't have the guys up front. Clelin Ferrell's playing a little bit better, but, I mean, he's still like an average defensive end right now. They don't have anyone behind him. Last week, Damon Arnett missed the corner. Last week, safety Jonathan Abram missed. So the Vegas Raiders are just lacking talent right now. And I'm looking for reasons to get Colts into my lineups right now. That certainly includes Jonathan Taylor. To a lesser extent, that includes T.Y. Hilton. I still think he's more like a wide receiver 4, but I think that T.Y. Hilton's earned a little bit of the benefit of the doubt after appearing to play a little healthier. And I think that he's the better bet over Michael Pittman right now, just because he's getting the more volume than he is in the last couple of weeks.
The narrative for Rivers is those offensive line issues, but we have 4 consecutive games now where he's been a top 15 quarterback, despite the offensive line, despite Jacoby Brissett coming in on the goal line. So I think Rivers and the Colts offense are terrific plays. To Hayden points on Jonathan Taylor, we've seen Taylor now in the lineup 2 out of the last 3 games because he was on the COVID list 2 weeks ago, and he's out-touched Nyheim Hines 42-18 in those 2 games. Like elite runner David Montgomery, he's making a few extra special plays per week between the tackles as well. You can kind of see it slowly starting to click for him, and also still has amazing hands. So I think he's a top 10 play as well. Just a tremendous offense environment overall for the Colts this week.
Yeah, I think Jonathan Taylor would feel like a no-brainer top 10 running back if he hadn't missed week 12, because he was really pushing the pile as a runner. And like John said, the 39-yard touchdown he scored as a receiver last week, he had to catch a low pass, had to make like an in-air adjustment to catch the ball, still secured it, and was off to the races. So it's 2 months later than we were expecting, but it is finally happening. And T.Y. Hilton, I was to say, it's been the wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 14, I believe, over the past 2 weeks. Well, it was kind of empty calories in week 12. It was kind of garbage time, but last week it was literally from the opening drive. And he looks healthier. He looks like maybe he's moving a gear faster. So I think I have him ranked ahead of Michael Pittman. I think he's in the wide receiver 3 mix.
Jonathan Taylor could have a massive ceiling game if Jonathan Abram is out. I mean, watching that game last week for the Raiders, they massively missed Abram as like their secondary missile flying up into the box and making those tackles on the edge. And if he's out, I mean, he missed it with a knee injury in week 13, then that's a big boom for the Colts. Speaking of running backs, Hayden, what about these on the Raiders side? I mean, Josh Jacobs is still not practicing. He is still sidelined. Devontae Booker, I believe, got like 13 or 14 touches for around 50 yards. That's not going to cut it for our standards and what we want out of him.
Yeah, the other guys behind him mixed in specifically on passing downs more than we kind of wanted. So I think that he's more like a RB2, RB3. The Colts defense is not one to mess around with DeForest Buckner in the lineup. So I want to like the Raiders offense. They're projected for the 11th most points on the week, but it's outside of Darren Waller, it's kind of hard to trust any of these guys in these matchups, especially if they're not getting like bankable workloads. And I think Devontae Booker's probably going to see more carries this week than he had last week. But if he's not getting the receiving workload, I don't really want to mess around with the guy that's going to be playing like 50 to 60% of the snaps.
I still think Aguilar is somewhat trustworthy as a flex option because his targets still to Henry Ruggs are insane. Last week, you wouldn't know it just by looking at the box score, but 11 targets, team high 4 end zone targets. He got sailed on 3 of those by Derek Carr, so it wasn't even his fault. So I think Aguilar is still the number 2 wide receiver on this team, behind Darren Waller, of course.
Let's move on to the New York Jets and the Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks 13.5-point home favorites, a total of 46.5 in this game. The Jets have not won Meanwhile, the Seahawks have won 8 games and have lost 4. Pat, Russell Wilson has 860 yards, 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions on passes, 20-plus yards down the field this year. Now he gets to face off against the worst deep pass defense in the league. I'm not, thinking that we need to sit here and tell people that they need to start every single member of the Seattle offense. But if there's anything else to talk about in this game, help me with it.
I mean, Russ might get less single coverage looks or zero coverage looks than he did he would have otherwise. But Russell Wilson, 6 passing touchdowns in his past 5 games. The well has dried up in fantasy. But for this Jets defense, not only do they allow big plays, I mean, they're still like shuffling guys in and out of their secondary. They kind of like remade their secondary on the fly 2 or 3 weeks ago. And that resulted in Derek Carr, QB1 for week 13. So Chris Carson, I think, will get established in this game. The Seahawks still struggling for like an identity on offense right now. They're having like a textbook identity crisis. And I think Chris Carson, that was his 3rd game back. They might like kind of fully unleash him as they try to figure out their offense heading into the playoffs. But, Russell Wilson, someone who has an extremely long history of having big fantasy days on like lower volume, even if he only gets 25 to 30 attempts, that will be all he needs against this Jets defense to have a top 5 or 6 day quarterback. So I think Russell Wilson will get back on track for fantasy purposes this week.
I think that's what we're looking at too. More of a coin flip game than people think, even though it's against the Jets. Pete Carroll already said that he's ready to give Chris Carson, quote unquote, a full load for the first time since he returned from injury. Carson, of course, handled 16 to 23 running back touches last week, so we can expect 20 plus in this actually sort of tough spot, since the Jets, if they do one thing well, it's defend the run. But he's still a usage-based RB1. And again, on minimal volume, Russ can get there in this spot, since the Jets secondary is bottom 4 in every passing rate imaginable, whether it be completed air yards, passing yards per game, the list goes on and on. So I still like the spot. Vegas does as well, because Seattle is implied to score the most points of any team on this entire slate. But I can see it being a closer game than some people think, because I think we are going to get Carson rammed up the middle to start the game.
No comment on keeping this close, but we do need to discuss on Jamison Crowder and Ty Johnson if he plays. Those are the 2 fringe guys for the Jets. I don't think you can start Denzel Mims or Brashad Perriman. They're getting empty calorie air yards down.
Mims can't even play because he's at home with personal reasons, and he misses COVID testing. So he might not even play for the rest of the season.
Well, I still think it's Jamison Crowder or bust for the Jets receivers. He had a 30% target share. He has all the rapport with Sam Darnold, and he's averaging like 15 fantasy points per game with Sam Darnold in his healthy game. So I'm fine with Jamison Crowder as like a volume-based wide receiver 3 after a couple really bad games coming off of his groin injury.
Let's have this Todd Johnson discussion, Daigle. We need to, because this is a fringe NFL talent who is on a team in the New York Jets with an expected point total of 17. Look, the Seattle Seahawks gave up 135 rushing yards to Wayne Gallman last week, but there have been other occasions where, they're getting healthier. Jamal Adams against the run. They have a lot of linebacker talent. I don't know if I can ride my first round of the fantasy playoffs with Ty Johnson as a starting running back, just from a big picture view. But if you really dig into it a little bit, I mean, there aren't, 12 solid running back plays this week. So
he got 24 of 32 running back touches whenever Frank Gore left the game. I was doing rankings, like I said earlier, and I assumed Christian McCaffrey and Frank Gore were both out, and yet still Ty Johnson landed as my RB22 overall on the week. So I'm curious where Pat has him. I just think he's a touch-based option, and I think the Jets offense should get more credit. I know that's insane. We've been down this road in this podcast before, but they're getting a little too much credit right now. Supposedly improved, but having said that, the last month they have played Jared Goff, Kyler Murray, who got injured in that game, Carson Wentz, and Colt McCoy. So I'm still not really respecting their defense, honestly. I think the Jets will be able to move the ball.
So the good news is they will be able to continue to improve against Sam Darnold, who the single worst player in the NFL now, folks. No, I'm just
that's Drew Lock. That's your boy Drew Lock, actually, Pat.
Of course, that is true.
Or Darius Slayton.
Ty Johnson, a classic hedge installed in the RB2-3 borderline. I do fear this has total off the rails potential for the Jets, as every Jets game does. And it was really nice workload. That was kind of like the Jets Super Bowl. It seemed like they put everything into that game. Like that was the game where they were not going to go 0-16, and it didn't work out. And this could be a massive, massive letdown spot this weekend. I think you can count on 10 to 12 touches for sure. But it's probably not case closed with Todd Johnson. I mean, we could see more Josh Adams this week. We could see more option 3. Option I don't know exists right now.
I don't even think they have option 3. Yeah.
I mean, who knows? I mean, but I feel comfortable with 10 to 12. So I put him in that low-end RB2 mix. There's the upside for a lot more. I mean, it could be he could end up easily over 20 touches, but I only felt safely comfortable doing 10 to 12 touches.
I also think it's hilarious that everyone in talking heads and media think Greg Williams is tanking. It's like, who was the DC of the last 0-16 team? Greg Williams. Like, this is what he does. Historically, he is bad at his job. Like, of course, he sent an all-out blitz in the very last play of the game.
I'm just ready for Greg Williams to join Twitter. That's what I want to see happen in 2021. All right. A game that was moved into the 4 o'clock slate, I believe, is the 9-3 Green Bay Packers facing the Detroit Lions. A big total of 55.5, 7.5 point favorites. The Packers are here on the road. Hayden, Matthew Stafford, we talked about it, over 400 yards last week. Marvin Jones, even without Kenny Galladay, who almost certainly will not play the rest of the season because he's a free agent this offseason. Last 6 weeks for Marvin Jones, 51 targets, 32 catches, 393 yards, and 5 scores. That's basically 17 fantasy points per game. I would say this week, if there is a one-on-one matchup he faces, it is Jair Alexander. So how are you feeling about Marvin Jones? And this is a very specific question, but again, in the first round of fantasy playoffs, people might not have been starting him over the last 6 weeks and might be leaning towards doing so this week.
Over the last month, you're leading in air yards, 11th in targets. So you're getting the volume that you would want. And that's with the Lions also ranking 30th in neutral pass rate over that span. So if we're expecting the offense to kind of turn the corner with the new coach, I can see Marvin Jones still battling as a wide receiver 3 despite Jair Alexander. And they play a lot of zone defense too. So it's not like he's just like manned up against Marvin Jones and Jair Alexander's not just manned up on Marvin Jones every single snap either. So I'm fine with Marvin Jones as a wide receiver 3.
Marvin Jones is kind of weird. He's almost being used as like a poor man's Deontay Johnson right now. Like someone who you always envision as like a outside big play threat. He's getting funneled like some easier looks than we're used to seeing from Marvin Jones. So I think maybe his usage is almost becoming like wide receiver 3 proof too. But yeah, it would be quite unfortunate if he got singled up a lot with Jair Alexander because I don't think he would be winning that matchup.
Dago, any news and notes here on DeAndre Swift, who has not played? We want him to play, obviously, because the Packers' defense is definitely hot and cold this season.
He was limited at practice, I believe, as we record this on Thursday. And, of course, last time we saw him, remember, he was trending towards being a league winner. Season high in snaps, 73% of the team's running back carries, a 15% target share on 5 targets. So if we get in this game, it's one that even David Montgomery went nuts for. So Swift will definitely be a top 6, top 7 option. We say they're not playing for anything, but Darrell Bevell is playing for his job as head coach. So I don't think Swift, if healthy, would be limited at all. I would imagine they just thrust him right back in there as an RB1.
Hayden, anything on the Packers end? I mean, I think it's a pretty easy choice that we have of Aaron Rodgers to Devontae Adams, of playing Aaron Jones, even if Jamal Williams is biting into his snaps. That's okay against this Lions defense. Any tertiary pieces that we should be excited for?
Start all of the guys that you know to start. I think that Alan Lazard, MVS, Robert Tonyan, one of those guys will have a good game. The other 2 probably not. But, I mean, the ceilings here are insane. The Lions already bad, missing their 2 corners, missing their defensive tackle. So, yeah, it's all systems go.
Also, the waiver wire column has a longer shelf life this week because I included an end-of-roster top 10 in there that you can go check out once waivers are already processed and just drop guys that you're not going to play through the fantasy playoffs and pick up their running backs. And I only mention that because Jamal Williams is atop that list. As we know, if Aaron Jones goes down, Jamal Williams was already RB1 twice this year. So start stashing guys like that at the end of your roster.
I just want to say too, there has been some chatter that they still might limit DeAndre Swift. I don't know if he like lost some weight or something from his viral illness. They were being a little cagey about whatever his illness was. There's going to be that upside there for sure. But we don't. Hopefully we'll get some more coach comments on DeAndre Swift's usage before Sunday.
Let's go to another game. The Atlanta Falcons and the Los Angeles Chargers, 49.5 total in this game. Both teams obviously have losing records, but the Falcons are 2.5-point favorites here. Pat, Julio Jones missed Thursday's practice. I don't know what that means for his outlook, though, at this point in week 14. Like, he's probable, he misses, he plays, he's, efficient. This Falcons offense can be good. This Falcons offense can be bad. I think you could just Control-C, Control-V over there to the Los Angeles Chargers, who last week lost 45-0, despite Justin Herbert having one of the best rookie quarterback seasons of all time. When you think about this game, Pat, what comes to mind?
Well, yeah, you hit the nail on the head with Julio Jones. There's no correlation whatsoever between like his practice status and how he's used on Sunday. He can be like removed from the injury report on Friday and then be like a decoy, and then he can be like a game time decision and play every snap. My initial thought on this game was seeing the total below 50. It was like shocking to me, but to me that's just like an indictment of Matt Ryan. And like this game should be over 50. Like two spiraling teams, like a Chargers defense that hasn't been nearly as good as it should have been all season. I mean, I guess Joey Bosa is really, really cooking, but I couldn't believe this total is over 50. And that's just about Matt Ryan, never really bringing home the bacon in real life or fantasy right now. And Julio, I wish I had something intelligent to say on Julio, but I mean, like anything is in play with Julio this weekend.
Well, Pat, my nerd brain went in this direction. Basically, you just compared Julio Jones to Goku, because what he does is he vanishes up to King Kai's, and you don't know when he's going to come back. But as soon as he is needed to save Earth, Julio Jones comes back and ultimately does do that.
I'm proud to say I do not understand the reference.
Daigle? Not bad.
Daigle's not.
Goku also the worst husband in any show ever. A miserable husband. Chi-Chi, there's a reason why she's angry every day.
Anything else you need to say about this one?
So Hayden's the Chargers expert. Will they get 11 men on the field when there are punts this weekend? Is that the key to the victory for the Chargers?
Well, Anthony Lynn's taking over special teams duty, so the answer to that is probably no. I do think that this is a good stylistic fit for the Chargers offense against the Falcons defense. The Falcons defense last week had a lot of communication issues on the secondary. They're playing a lot of man defense. When they go to zone, they're miscommunicating everything. The Falcons are a total mess right now, and if I'm picking a quarterback that's really good on these vertical concepts and you have receivers that can win downfield, I'm kind of buying into Justin Herbert potentially in a ceiling game here after looking just atrocious last week. I mean, the difference between the Falcons coaching staff and Bill Belichick's coaching staff is pretty big. So I'm expecting a rebound for all these guys.
I'm with Pat here on the over. I like both offenses a whole lot in this game. We're going to talk about this game quite a bit in tomorrow's DFS Building Block show, or Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, whenever you're listening. Ryan, I understand that Falcons' performance didn't look impressive, but 16 points was still the most the Saints have given up in their last 5 games. And now you look at what the Chargers have allowed on defense the past month. 29 points to the Dolphins, led by Tua. 28 points to Joe Flacco and the Jets. And then, of course, I understand defense and special team touchdowns, but still allow 45 points to a Patriots offense that really can't move the ball. So with Julio presumably healthy, I don't know if he's healthy, but I do know that last week he played his highest snap rate, 94%, since week 10 of the 2018 season. So maybe there's a reason they're just letting him have midweek off, and then they're just going to launch him out there again as they continue to try to move the ball. So love Ryan, love the double stack with Calvin and Julio, and of course bringing him back with Justin Herbert. We also need to talk about Austin Eckler, because I know negative game script seems like it threw this out of whack. Like Kalen Ballage was only involved because of negative game script. That's not the case, though. He out-touched Austin Eckler 3-2 in the opening drive when it was still a competitive game. He had 10 touches, of course. Eckler's 12. There's still something to say about a running back who has 25 targets in the past 2 games like Eckler, making him a low-end RB1. But if Ballage is healthy, and even though Josh Kelly's out, Ballage is getting double-digit touches behind Eckler every single week.
I got to piggyback one thing of what John said too. Like, despite what Taysom Hill might have you believe, the Falcons still do give up a ton of running back receptions too. So I think we will see very good Austin Eckler game script.
The New Orleans Saints, speaking of Taysom Hill, are facing the Philadelphia Eagles. Total of 44. The 10-2 Saints are 6.5-point favorites here. Hayden, is this fair? Is this really fair for Jalen Hurts to make his first start against the number 2 ranked New Orleans Saints defense? I mean, we've seen Justin Herbert come in and be a fantasy football darling. We've seen Taysom Hill be, the number 3 quarterback in terms of fantasy points per game as a starter. Can Jalen Hurts be next in line in this very, very, very difficult matchup with one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL and skill position players who aren't helping out their quarterback?
I think asking for QB1 numbers is a little rich, but I think he's certainly on the QB2 radar just because we can really bank on his rushing potential. And he was so efficient and so electric at Alabama and Oklahoma. And he might be a little bit of an underrated passer. He took a lot of big steps in his final collegiate season, and he had insane numbers even for that offense at Oklahoma. So I don't have any faith in the Eagles coaching staff at all. And that's all I can say about that. But I do think that we're going to see 40, 50, 60 rushing yards from Jalen Hurts, and that's all you need.
Pat, you're the one who talked highly of him to start the show, so you go.
I've got him in the top 20. QB 18 or 19. He's essentially a 1 or 2 read quarterback right now at the stage of his NFL career, but he will process them so much faster than Carson Wentz, because I think even we would maybe be processing our reads faster than Carson Wentz at this point, playing the game as slowly as possible. So I think he will at least get the ball out quickly. And there are some playmakers in this offense. I think maybe it's Carson Wentz making his receivers look bad as much as anything else. And then he's a real deal dual threat. He is an actual, he's real running. Unlike Carson Wentz, it's been kind of like Ryan Fitzpatricking all season and taking off running a lot. Jalen Hurts will truly threaten the defense as a runner. So I think he'll get the ball out quickly when he passes, and he's going to tuck and run a lot. And it'll probably be a day that's much better in fantasy than real life.
I am very skeptical of this spot, but I think you should pick him up for weeks 15 and 16 against the Cardinals and Cowboys, no matter what. And then at least he will have the rushing floor in this game. And what gives the Eagles hope, maybe not to win, but perhaps to cover, if you can get the hook, is that they have not seen him, and we have not seen him on film at all. So at least there's an untapped ceiling we don't know about. Like I said, I still question his arm talent. That was the knock coming into the league. That's why he sunk to become a second rounder. But yeah, it's a tough spot, man. It's a tough sell.
I even want to give Jalen Hurts credit, because at Alabama, he wasn't an NFL player. He wasn't an NFL talent.
Right.
He wasn't good there. And then he goes to Oklahoma and drastically improves and does so well to become a second-round selection. And I mentioned this when talking about Miles Sanders earlier. You have to hope that there's a little bit of Kyler Murray magic there in Jalen Hurts where they can get him down to the red zone or even inside the 10-yard line. And because Miles Sanders only has 8 total carries inside the 10-yard line all season long. I mean, compare that to, Peyton Barber, who had 7 in week 1, right? What you need is to have those high-value touches and those zone read, RPO situations, and hopefully, Miles Sanders can cash in on those, because right now, especially against this run defense that has been fantastic against running backs for years, Miles Sanders is a dreadful play here at the start of the first round of your fantasy playoffs after selecting him in round 1 or round 2 in your fantasy drafts. That's brutal. So brutal.
I have him outside of the top 24. I need to double check that. But if I don't, I need to move him down. He played 35 of 62 snaps last week. He's not getting the receiving workload because Boston Scott's mixing in, and now Jalen Hurts is just as big of a threat as he's kind of on the Cam Newton level, near the goal line, where he's the priority because he's just a big truck stick. And I don't see the path with Miles Sanders right here. It's as bad as it gets, honestly.
Jordan Howard had 4 carries. Jordan Howard's getting touches now too.
All right. Go ahead.
No, quickly. I know a lot of people are asking the fallout, though, around Jalen Hurts with their receivers. But the good news is Peterson kind of made the decision for us. He's taking Travis Fulgham off the field significantly for Alshon Jeffrey, and we can't play Alshon Jeffrey. So it's Rager as a deep league flex play, and then you have to trust Goddard. You don't have a choice because you can't find a better option anyways.
What needs to be said, Pat, about this Saints offense? This might be Taysom's last start of the season. There's a lot of rumblings that Drew Brees comes back in week 15. We've also heard that Taysom Hill has solidified his spot as the Saints starting quarterback in 2021. Alvin Kamara, while it was a little bit better last week, it's still not quite up to like the first 5 or 6 weeks or 7 weeks that we saw of Alvin Kamara. Anything of note here on the Saints' end?
I mean, the good news is he didn't catch 0 or 1 passes, Alvin Kamara, but the bad news was that it was 2 passes. So not really a huge improvement. I mean, after 2 games against the Falcons and one against Kendall Hinton, this is kind of like inexplicably Taysom Hill's toughest challenge. As much as like the Eagles are kind of crumbling on all facets, this is still going to be like the feistiest front 7 he's faced. I guess is Darius Slay playing? Was he like faking a knee injury? Against
Who cares? He's garbage right now.
He was really getting taken to school there. But yeah, I am interested to see Taysom Hill against. I don't know. Are the Eagles even a good defense anymore? I mean, this is.
They can rush the passer. They can rush the passer. But I would say the one of the biggest developments is Teron Armstead returning to practice, and I think we saw Andrus Peat returning last week. So like, if the Eagles had any avenue of success, it was just frustrating a mobile Taysom Hill, but still we've seen him fumble at points when he wasn't the quarterback and when he is the quarterback. But having maybe the best offensive line back together again in this week, it just adds up once again to a bad matchup.
Despite the fumbles, despite the bad throws, the QB3 overall in his 3 starts. So you trust the high floor. You don't have to trust Sanders, Traquan Smith, Jared Cook. Like Jared Cook and Traquan Smith last week were running wide open. Like they got lost on defensive communications. And so Taysom had the easiest deliveries to them, whereas he continues force-feeding Michael Thomas for a 46% target share now. So pretty much 2 guys to play along with Taysom Hill in that offense, and that's it.
Let's turn to a fun game, Hayden Winks. Washington football team, San Francisco 49ers. Just a total of 43.5 in this game. Both teams 5-7, but the 49ers at home are 3-point favorites. Hayden, Washington's defense stifled the Steelers last week. Why can't they do that against Nick Mullins? And I'll give you my answer before I let you answer that one. And it's because it's Kyle Shanahan. This is a multi-level offense versus what we've seen from the Pittsburgh Steelers in recent weeks, which is certainly anything than multi-level. But yeah, what's your view of this game? Because I would say that, Washington is a team that everyone has an optimistic feeling of right now.
Well, the problem with Nick Mullins, he's kind of got that Jimmy G in him when there's some pressure, then he kind of falls apart. He's 32nd out of 40 quarterbacks in passer rating under pressure. And of course, with Washington, you're getting maybe the second best pass rush in the entire NFL right now. Both of their DNs look awesome right now. Montez Sweat's really coming on. But yeah, I mean, the story here is Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel. I am not buying Brandon Ayuk as like a wide receiver 1 or wide receiver 2 in this matchup. I think that Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are probably going to even out closer to the same amount of targets overall and about the same amount of usage down the stretch. But Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk are really good players, and the Washington secondary is not that great. So I think if they do get some scheme touches, they can make the most of it. I'm not really expecting a monster ceiling game out of the offense just because Washington's front 7 is going to cause Nick Mullins some trouble here.
And for their backfield, the roles have changed the past 2 games with all back. I was skeptical in week 1 whenever Raheem Mostert at least got 50% of the running back touches, but now that's what he's averaged the past 2 games. Whereas remember, before his first 2 injuries, so 2 healthy games all year to this point, he had 65% of the running back touches. So Jeff Wilson now, 21 touches to Mostert's 28, and this 2-game stretch is clearly involved. He runs relentlessly. He looks like he's trying to run someone over, like old school Marion Barber, every time he touches the ball. So Wilson has looked good. He's now getting carries between the 20s, not just the red zone, and he's become an issue for Mostert.
I will say the Washington secondary, not being nearly as good as the front 7s. Why I think I have Brandon Ayuk ranked probably about 10 spots ahead of Deebo Samuel this week, where I think Deebo was also battling a bruised foot. I think like his, negative ADOT, yak attempts could maybe not go as far this week against Washington, whereas Brandon Ayuk, who's being used a little bit more as a traditional wide receiver, might have like the higher yardage ceiling. Maybe Josh and I talked about this earlier this week. I think he's averaging 7 catches for 87 yards over his past 3 appearances. The problem is all the stop and start. He's played. Has he played 2 games in a row like all year? So it's kind of hard to like get in the groove with Brandon Ayuk in fantasy. But he's been a wide receiver 1. Obviously, I'm not ranking him that way, but I do have him ranked as a low end wide receiver 2.
I mentioned that the 49ers are at home. They're really not at home. And, they're playing in Arizona. Like, I want to bring actually a human element into this conversation if I can. I mean, San Francisco won't truly be at home, and that means in their headquarters or even in their homes for the rest of the season. Practice, playing. I mean, they're basically the only team in the NFL right now that is operating inside of a bubble. I mean, they can't see their family for right now, the remaining month of the NFL season. Don't you think that would impact your work? I mean, that would impact my work. It wouldn't be surprising at all if we don't see the same 49ers team defensively, offensively, whatever, be as good as they were in the past, because they have feelings. They have emotions. They get drained. And now they're just living in Arizona as a collective team of 100 people. And that's that. I mean, that is so different than everyone else in the NFL right now. To me, it's just a major talking point of this conversation. That's
actually the one storyline that has crushed me, and I'm dead inside. I feel nothing. But when Raheem Mostert has talked, because remember, Raheem Mostert stepped away from his family at the beginning of the year, decided he would not see them all 17 weeks, and if they continue the Super Bowl, he just wouldn't see them since they have a newborn baby. And now not only that, but they move away from their city where he doesn't have friends around either. So that's the one storyline that I keep going back to as well.
Yeah. The one thing this is why Shanahan's just so awesome. He did say that for Christmas, no matter what, no matter if they can't practice or whatever the situation is, they want to be able to bring the families in, and they're really monitoring the psych levels of all these players. I think they've even given them a lot of therapy opportunities as well. So Shanahan's doing the best of the situation, but like you said, this is not a fun situation overall.
Yeah, I mean they are the only team in a bubble right now. We do, before we move on, need to talk about this Washington backfield, Hayden, because we know Antonio Gibson. I know that Ron Rivera and co keep saying, well, we'll see how he looks on Sunday. I mean, turf toe, he's not playing, and he might not play next week, right? So we have seen J.D. McKissic look good at times. Peyton Barber has never looked good. But high-value touches near the goal line go to Peyton Barber. Yet, I don't know where you guys have him. I wouldn't hate J.D. McKissic as a top 24 running back play this week at all.
Yeah, I'm not going to start Peyton Barber just because that would require a positive game script, and the Vegas is only projecting Washington to score 20 points. That's 29th on the slate. So banking on Peyton Barber when you have every single team playing is a big ask for me. I do think J.D. McKissic in PPR formats is a low-end RB2. He's going to get a lot of work. He's probably going to see 7-8 targets. That probably means 34 receiving yards. But, I mean, in PPR formats, you got to do what you can take. And I think he's earned it with Antonio Gibson out.
And it was a one-score game all last week against Pittsburgh, and McKissick still out-snapped Barber 53-24. He's going to be on the field. We even saw them scheme up a touch inside the 5-yard line for him in motion, but he got dragged down to the ground and didn't get the touchdown. So, yeah, they're going to use him. He will be their featured running back. So, of course, you have to like him, just knowing he will catch the ball, and still has the highest target share on the team from Alex Smith.
Bleak.
Well, Scott Turner's trying everything now, I think this is kind of where Scott Turner thrives. He did it at the end of the season last year in Carolina. He's doing it now to McKissic and Cam Sims and so on and so forth. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if we see a little tricks up his sleeve and a lot of those featuring J.D. McKissic. Dago, anything else?
Go back to Terry McLaurin. Don't worry about last week. You go back.
I was gonna say it's Terry is one of the safest floors, but now is he a no ceiling player now with Alex Smith? And if he doesn't hit his floor, then is he just a complete liability and fan? Because he had not hit it had been months since he hadn't hit his ceiling, but that was very discourage usage.
He popped in the usage model, right, Hayden?
Well, he had a season low fantasy usage last week, but I think that's just more of a 1-game sample. I don't want to really lean into that, especially with Antonio Gibson now. The Washington's going to run 50 plays. Where's the ball going to? I mean, Terry McLaurin probably projects for 10 plus targets, and Richard Sherman and Verrett are good corners, but you have to bank on the touches here, even with the low team total. We know where the ball is going. It's him, Logan Thomas, and J.D. McKissic. That's it.
Primetime games. Let's go to Sunday Night Football. The Pittsburgh Steelers, who are now 11-1, go to the Buffalo Bills, who are 2.5-point favorites at 9-3, a 46.5 total in this game. Dago, is it fair for the Bills to be favored here? I mean, both of these teams sure do love to pass the football. I would say one team in the Steelers are kind of dinking and dunking it down the field. Meanwhile, we have seen Josh Allen, especially last week against those 49ers, just throw it all over the park and have extreme success doing it.
Josh Allen's performance last week was genuinely one of the best we've seen from any quarterback all year long. Just how he attacked where we thought he couldn't attack, where he had been poor the past 6 games or so over the top. And that's where he had his most success as Brian Daboll continues carving out a head coaching resume for himself. I'm trusting Josh Allen here, not a shock to say, but I want to speak on the backfield really quick because we did see Devin Singletary emerge. We saw Zach Moss actually outtouch him 3-2 on the opening drive, and then the very next play from the opening drive after that wild series of events that led to both teams being stuffed on the goal line, Moss gets a carry inside the end zone, he fumbles it, and then we didn't see him again until the fourth quarter. And Singletary, of course, ended up with 21 touches and 85% snaps, nearly a season high. So if that's the case again, and they're not trusting the rookie, Singletary would quietly become a high-end RB2 in this game. But again, I don't know if they're going to trust Zach Moss suddenly in this one.
The Bills, the shenanigans in the backfield, like it certainly looked like quite a commitment, like a legit commitment to Devin Singletary, but I've kind of thought that a few other times. It's very hard, I feel like, to take anything week to week with the Bills backfield. And Josh Allen, this is one where I wasn't quite sure where to end up with Josh Allen in the rankings because, like John said, I mean, that was as impressive as a quarterback performance we've seen all year. But now the Steelers permit the fewest quarterback fantasy points. You can get them for some big plays, which the Bills have been generating a ton of, even without John Brown. But it is about as bad of a matchup as possible. I kept Josh Allen in the top 5, though, just because of the rushing floor and like the passing upside is going to be there any given week. But I wish we could have seen him come off, let Josh cook last week to a softer matchup, maybe let him get some real rhythm going. Concerning spot.
With both of these teams being top 5 in neutral pass rate and both of them in the top half in neutral offensive pace, I'm kind of expecting this game to have a little bit of shootout potential despite both of these teams being well coached on defense. And the Steelers have probably the best defense in the NFL, but Josh Allen's playing really, really good. He's taken such a big leap, especially downfield. I looked at his completion percentage over expected. Last year, it was -12. This year, it's +6.6. That's a massive jump on deep targets. And that's a credit to Stephon Diggs. That's a credit to Daboll. That's a credit to Cole Beasley playing well. They're just getting a lot of things done. And I think that the Bills total, it's only at 24.25 points right now. That seems a little bit low just because we're going to see both of these teams just pass it at will. And the clock's going to be moving really slowly throughout the game.
Yeah, Cole Beasley's even catching 15-plus yard passes. All these plays that Josh Allen is making outside of structure are unbelievable. An amazing throw to Gabriel Davis on that dig route last week. Meanwhile, that's fun. That's exciting. That's a roller coaster. That's enjoyable. The Steelers are the opposite. Last week, that was brutal to watch. And what they are doing are these short passes, which I think Sean McDermott might give up unless he wants to change, his style of defense. But Daigle, what they're doing right now is relying on their wide receivers to win after the catch. And that's what the offense is. Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster. And there's been so much conversation about drops lately. I would say that this offense and Ben Roethlisberger is setting his wide receivers up for failure in a lot of those situations. I'm not saying Deontay shouldn't drop a lot of the passes he does, right? That's right on him. But I think there's also some blame that goes on Big Ben because he is throwing quick routes, short time to throw into heavily trafficked areas of the field. And what do you expect these wide receivers to do? Just catch it within a guy of a quarter of a yard between him and another defender every single time. So something needs to change in order for the Steelers team to really, connect once they get to the playoffs, I think.
I was asked about the drops in my waivers chat, and my response was, I don't care. Targets are still earned. Deontay Johnson is beating guys off the line of scrimmage. And sure, he's dropping a few per game. His floor would be higher if he caught everything, but he's still seeing the most number of targets among all these receivers. Tomlin was asked about it. He said, you drop the ball, you don't play. But he wasn't talking about Deontay. He was talking about Chase Claypool, who James Washington ran 31 routes to Claypool's 26 this past week. So I think they are mixing in Washington now just because Ben loves him so much and requested it as the number 3 receiver with Claypool, whether I agree with that or not. And then Deontay and Juju are still leading this team in route runs, with Juju never going downfield. He never goes beyond 5 yards within the line of scrimmage.
Juju has some of the most depressing box scores in the entire NFL. I don't know why Ben Roethlisberger wants to play James Washington over Calvin Johnson 2.0. That is between Ben and Chase Claypool. So Deontay Johnson, the drops. So a lot of them are like in the hospital area of the field, right over the middle of the field, about to get lit up. But some of them are very bad.
I agree.
I want you to stop dropping the ball so much, Deontay. I'm very tempted in my league where I have catch bonuses and yardage bonuses and distance scoring. Part of the way the Steelers back-to-back games on like weekdays. Steelers have been in a very weird, they're totally out of rhythm as a team, and they coincided with not having James Conner, not having a running back, not having a running game, and so making them go even more all in on the short passing. I think the Steelers will be a little more watchable on offense this week and in the passing game, and we've kind of seen their nadir as a watchable passing offense. I think basically that it was a product of like the extremely weird schedule and having no running game to speak of.
Hey, and let's close this game with this. Eric Ebron has now emerged as a top 12 tight end each and every week. And 2, James Conner seems to be back off the COVID list. In his absence, it's been dicey with Benny Snell and company. Again, James Conner was like the running back 8 or 9 or 10 drafted in your leagues. Can you start him in the first round?
I'm going to have him probably outside of my top 24. There is a theory going out there that the Steelers need to run the ball in the playoffs, and maybe they try to figure that out right now. But this is an important game against the Bills. I'm not expecting them to try to trot out James Conner if they're not expecting it to work. So, the Steelers have some problems, but they're still a good team. Like I think they were in so many primetime games the last 10 days. They played like 3 primetime games the last 10 days. So we're over analyzing all these things. But
the Wednesday afternoon games is just legendary.
Well, so. I have to say one thing. Danny Kelly, friend of the show, he compared Deontay Johnson to Ronald Jones, and I have not been able to get that comparison outside of my head since that tweet.
To be clear, though, it wasn't just Benny Snell. The way Pittsburgh plays on offense goes back 5 weeks now, back to week 9. James Conner had 9, 13, and 13 carries in 3 games before the COVID list. They just don't want to run the ball.
Let's close with Monday Night Football. The Baltimore Ravens, the Cleveland Browns. Chilly night in Cleveland, probably. I don't know. 46.5. Browns are 9-3. Pat, the Ravens are 7-5, but here, 1-point favorites. And the only reason why I can guess is this, because back all the way in week 1, the Browns were demolished by the Baltimore Ravens, 38-6. 38-6. But since then, Pat, and especially in recent weeks, isn't it fair to say that the Browns, 1, know their identity, and 2, have been better at producing their identity than the Ravens have? They're more successful with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we're not getting another Lake Erie hurricane game on Monday night. The Browns, they know their identity as well as any team in the NFL at this point, I feel like. And it's been a while, I believe, since we had a Baker Mayfield stink bomb. The Ravens defense is coming together. The player for me to watch in this game is Lamar Jackson, where he kind of came on before the COVID madness. Had a pretty decent game Monday night. He's still the big play, the big touchdown. He made a bad throw. So we're still not seeing great throws from Lamar Jackson, but he's fully reestablished the rushing floor. I think he's averaging 13 carries over his past 5 games. So he's like the X factor player to me in this game. He was the QB5 in that demolition against the Browns back in week 1. That was an eternity ago. But yeah, this was a game where I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know what the line would be. I didn't know what the total would be. I'm maybe a little surprised that the Ravens are, I think they're 2.5-point favorites right now. And This is one of the games where I go in excited to see because I just don't know how this one is going to go.
I think the Browns are getting a little too much credit for last week's performance. Baker still has been bad under pressure, of course. 39% completion rates, that's the word I'm looking for. 4 picks under pressure. And we know that Calais Campbell, Brandon Williams, a few other guys will be back to the Ravens as well. So if they can get pressure, maybe Stefanski schemes open more play action and keeps Baker safe. But I'm still worried about the Browns offense here.
That is the key. That is the key.
Yeah.
It's pushing Baker into a confined pocket and forcing him to make decisions in that circumstance. Because last week he was basically throwing on air in that first half. And while it was good, and while we can get excited about it because, hey, the Browns are a good football team and they're going to make the playoffs, Baker's negatives were still not tested. And until Baker's negatives are tested and he has shown that he can overcome them, I would say once that happens, and then once the running game, I'm not going to say is ever going to be shut down, but limited and can't engulf a defense, then this team is going to struggle. And I think they still have their limitations, somewhat like, the 2019 Tennessee Titans, Hayden Winks. But speaking of struggling, the Ravens have struggled all season long, except for this past week, seemingly against the Cowboys when they were finally able to rack up 300 rushing yards, basically.
Yeah, they ran all over the Cowboys, who have just so many troubles right now. But I was going to be betting the Ravens here, and I thought that was going to be the contrarian take on the podcast. But we also kind of are leaning that the Ravens pass rush and that their top 5 in blitz rate could cause Baker Mayfield some trouble, especially because he doesn't have like the Odell Beckham to like win on the outside consistently. So I think the Ravens are in a good spot. I think that they're really pushing for that playoff spot right now, and they have a path to get back into the mix. And I really trust the rushing offense right now, and I'm hoping that we get Mark Andrews back because I think he's the guy that kind of unleashes the upside of the passing attack. Because right now it's just Marquise Brown and Lamar Jackson running up the middle right now. But I think the Ravens have a chance to sneak back into the playoffs mix. They look a little bit better than I think that people were giving them credit for earlier on the year.
I still put Dobbins the top 24 running back, but I am slightly skeptical of the usage against the Cowboys. Common retort is that he was being limited off the COVID list, but why would they play him behind Mark Ingram, who was also on the COVID list? It doesn't logically make sense whatsoever. So I'm worried that they slipped back into this 3-headed committee that they were using before, since Dobbins only had 11 of 26 backfield touches. Having said that, we know he's still the most explosive of the trio. So you can go back to him if only because the position lacks pop around that range.
Pat, where do you have Dobbins ranked this week?
I have him top 20, but I don't feel great about it. I think like RB 18 or 19, because I do kind of think the 3-man thing, it's going to be like their 3rd game in like 12 days or something. I think that probably plays into it too. And I didn't see a compelling reason to think that the 3-man committee would just disappear again. I think maybe once they get back on their normal schedule, normal-ish, it'll still be a short week in week 15. Maybe J.K. Dobbins would be kind of allowed to take over the backfield again, but I agree with John. Right? I have great fears about this. I have J.K. Dobbins in the top 20 based on his upside, and like you can still have a solid RB2 day on only 10 or 11 carries in this offense. But yeah, I could not get him any higher than low-end RB2.
I pieced together my notes this morning, and at that point, the Ravens were 1-point favorites. So that's moved 1.5 to 2.5 now. It's interesting. Something to monitor that we'll talk about on Sunday as well. Well, on Sunday, that is Rotoworld Live. Tune in, join us, noon Eastern, on Periscope, on YouTube, on Twitch, all those wonderful places. Again, check out the Building Block Show, which is Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And check out Patrick Doherty's rankings chat, which is up on Twitch as well on Friday afternoons. Is that fair?
That's fair. That's more than fair. 2 p.m. Eastern, folks. Check it out. It's the best Patrick Doherty chat out there.
All right, let's get out of here. Longest one of the year, but I think it deserved it. I think it deserved it this week. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you to Pat. Thank you for Hayden. Thank you to Daigle for joining me. All right, I'm Josh Norris. Up the Villa, 7:30 a.m. on Saturday against Wolves. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.